We're now joined by George Negus, Australian journalist, via webcam from Coffs Harbour on the New South Wales mid-north coast. George, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, whenever we put your name alongside Margaret Thatcher's, people instantly think of that famous exchange you had with the Iron Lady in the 1980s. Let's remind people.
Why do people stop us in the street almost and tell us that Margaret Thatcher isn't just inflexible, she's not just single-minded, on occasion she's plain pig-headed and won't be told by anyone?
Would you tell me who has stopped you in the street and said that?
Ordinary Britons.
Where?
In conversation.
But I thought you'd
pubs.
just come from Belize.
Oh, this is not the first time we've been here.
Will you tell me who and where and when?
Ordinary Britons in restaurants,
How
in
many?
cabs.
How many?
I would say at least 1 in 2.
I'm sorry, it's an expression I've never heard. Tell me who has said it to you, when,
These
and
are
where.
people that we meet in passing.
But
and we
of course you
obviously
cannot
raise
say
the
who or
question
where.
of the state of their country with them. And they tell us, yes, we have a tough Prime Minister, but she's a little bit pig-headed. She won't be told by anybody.
Isn't this interesting? Even the tone of voice you're using is changing from what you used earlier.
And George Negus, you were told. Talk about a frosty exchange. Take us through it.
I don't think there's been a month since then, Michael, where I haven't been asked about that interview, to be honest. It's something I've almost had to live with for 30 years. I think it was actually the way she performed in an interview is an indication of the woman. She is tough, and she was inflexible, and she was very strong-minded, but she probably was pig-headed. And I think that's probably verified by the fact that it was her own party, the guys, not faceless men, but they got into her face sometime later. And she didn't even get, if you like, thrown out by the British voters. She got tossed out by her own party, who I think had had enough of what I was, strangely enough, talking about, that she was inflexible and she couldn't wear any other opinion about how to go about things than her own. And I think that was the difference between what Margaret Thatcher did that was good and what Margaret Thatcher did, which is questioned and being questioned even now. The country probably needed some of the measures that she instituted. Whether they needed to be done the way that she did it, there's a difference, if you like, between being tough and being brutal. And in the process, a lot of lives were destroyed, economically and in fact, in so many ways, by the Thatcher policies and the underclass in England. The 3 members of the family, son, father and grandfather, were out of a job as one of the legacies. But the country did need a kick in the rump. But whether or not it had to be done the way she did it, I think is the question that history will keep asking.
So you believe, George, that character trait, the whole, this lady's not for turning, was in the end a bit of a weakness for Margaret Thatcher?
I think she ended up being her own worst enemy to that extent. And when she got tough with her own people, they'd had enough. I mean, things have been said about politicians of our own, male and female, very recently, that where people say that the reason we can't handle them is because they're just inflexible. They have to be absolutely convinced of their own wisdom and genius, ultimately at their own expense. And I think that was what might have happened to Margaret.
But still, all of these years later, George, she is a remarkable figure in the sense that she has influenced not just British politics, but of course politics here, and has influenced generations of Western political leaders. What do you put that down to?
Well, she probably invented the term. If not invented it, was the first person to have herself described that way. She was a conviction politician, which means she was convinced that her way was the only way. And she probably also, she was the, if you like, the front runner in terms of neoconservatism and economic rationalism. And we're still seeing the flow on from that. That will probably be Margaret Thatcher's legacy. But I think that the fact is that she was unashamedly, unapologetically, and I know it's unfashionable to use terms like left and right, unapologetically a right-wing conservative politician, which in a democracy you're allowed to be. But that sort of thing comes at a price, in the same way that extreme left-wing politics comes at a price. And I think the UK benefited, and the rest of the Western world benefited by the example that she set. What people questioned subsequently is whether or not it had to be done the way she did it, with the brutality and the human impact that it had. And I think people will always, therefore, half the population, if you like, will revere her, and the other half will revile her.
And finally, George, I've always wondered, and here's my great opportunity to finally get an answer to this question, what happened when the cameras switched off after that remarkable interview?
She read the riot act, to be honest, and nobody will be surprised to hear that. She demanded that the interview be used without any editing, which we refused to do. Telephones rang between the British High Commission in Australia and the Australian High Commission in England. I was carpeted by the press secretary. I thought for a moment if I wasn't careful and got out of the place and out of the country quickly, I might end up in the Tower of London. But it also meant that I got seats and tables at restaurants in London for a while I never thought I'd get.
You've been dining out on it for years. George Negus, it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Michael.